Welcome to our web exclusive. I'm Mike Montecalvo, along with Eyewitness News analyst Lieutenant General Reginald Centracchio, and the latest developments, General, as of Wednesday, on the U.S. soldier suspected of killing 16 Afghan villagers. We've now learned that the soldier was caught on a surveillance video surrendering at the base. 16 people were killed, including 9 kids. Before we get into the whole particulars, what was your reaction when you heard that?
Certainly one was a sense of tragedy. This is just another thing we have to deal with about maintaining trust and confidence in the American forces and NATO in general, that our soldiers are there to help the Afghan people. When you have things like this happen, it's extremely hard to deal with. So it was a feeling of real disappointment, certainly.
You know, the big question is it time to get out the burning of the Qurans? Now we're having this situation. The people of Afghanistan are chanting death to America. They want us out. You know, where does that put us in relation to where we need to be?
I think it puts us in a precarious situation, and I think we need to look at the strategy. I'm not suggesting we should move out prematurely. That would cause another bunch of problems that we hadn't thought about. But I think we need to look at how we're employing our troops and deploying them into the areas that they'll certainly become targets. This particular soldier was assigned to one of those sensitive units, and its whole mission was to be able to go into a community, win the hearts and minds of the Afghan people, certainly deal with the leadership of that particular area. And when this happens, you know, it totally destroys that whole strategy where they were attempting to gain the confidence and trust of the Afghan people.
Well, General, he was deployed 3 times to Iraq, 1 time to Afghanistan. We're finding out that he possibly had post-traumatic stress disorder. You know, down the line we could find out he had an alcohol problem or a drug problem too. How does someone get deployed 4 times and slip through the cracks like that?
I think we're finding that the system, that especially at the base that he was at in Seattle, in Washington State, that is, gives us reason that we should look at it, and it perhaps needs an overhaul. We have overlooked, I feel, that many of the things that initially give us reason that we should declare and determine that a soldier is suffering PTSD, we need to take them and put them in a specific pattern of trying to recoup them to make a decision as to whether in fact they're deployable or not. We've been too quick to react, I think, in just dismissing it, because there may have been alcohol, as I understand, involved in this. That's one of the tenets that how you deal with PTSD, either through alcoholism or drug addiction or something else to offset the feelings that you're experiencing. This particular soldier, allegedly killing 16 people, could have just snapped. Perhaps it was something that was being built up in his system over a period of time, going back to the first deployment into Iraq. And I'm not sure of this, but I would suggest that it's a pretty good place to start looking.
Random drug testing is already in place, isn't it?
That's correct. Random drug testing. At one time it was 100%, and then we reverted back to random, and I believe that's still in place. And when you're deployed, certainly that's one of the first considerations, that alcohol is absolutely prohibited in any combat zone, but especially in this particular area, Afghanistan, where alcohol itself is never ever accepted by the Afghan people.
Now, General, we really don't know a lot of what's going on here. They're still investigating, but you sat at that seat so many times and said, you know, soldiers come back and they won't tell you sometimes what you need to know.
That's exactly right.
It's because of stigma. And I'm not sure, and we can't say that this particular soldier is in that situation, but it kind of at least falls into line where maybe he was screened and was good enough to mask all that of what was going on.
Maybe, but the procedure that we're using to screening maybe needs to be overhauled. We're missing it. Somehow the command structure missed it. And for us to redeploy that soldier this time, the 4th consecutive time, 3 into Iraq and 1 to Afghanistan, knowing he had previous problems, there seems to be, I think, a fault in the overall command structure to be able to isolate these particular soldiers, give them the care they need, and certainly take a real good hard look before we redeploy them back into a combat zone.
You know what the topic's already coming up to is, will he face the death penalty? How does that come into play here?
Well, he goes before a military tribunal, and certainly a military court-martial. One of the considerations, as was suggested by Defense Secretary Panetta, could be the death sentence, death penalty. Whether that actually ever happens or not, I'm not quite sure. I think there's so much possibility of things in his defense and so much mitigation that he could perhaps receive some kind of a determination to go to a mental health facility for a long period of time, and he would never be charged with anything short of having PTSD and obviously snapping.
Ultimately, it's up to the president. Even if it's recommended that he get the death penalty, the president could overturn that.
I believe that's the case. You know, if a military court-martial says, okay, we've determined that the death penalty is an appropriate consequence of this, I believe the president can, as the commander-in-chief, can actually say, we're not going to do this. But he can't reverse it. And so if the panel came in with a life imprisonment, the president can't say, I want the death penalty. So I think it's that kind of an understanding we have.
You mentioned U.S. Defense Secretary Leon Panetta. He arrived on Wednesday in Afghanistan. He did mention that the tragedy should not derail the U.S. and NATO strategy of gradual withdrawal of troops by the end of 2014. The whole plan, General, is to make sure the Afghan army and forces are ready. They have about 300,000 right now. They would go to 350,000. What's stopping the Taliban from infiltrating those troops if they haven't done so already?
None whatsoever, and I'm fearful that that is the case. When you have a cause for concern that you don't have the definite loyalty of the Afghan military service and Afghan security forces, there's always the possibility that they could, in fact, knowingly allow Taliban to be part of any future operation. That's a huge challenge, and we need to clarify the term withdrawal. I think the American people need to understand through programs like this that withdrawal does not mean all of our American soldiers are coming out of the area. It means we are going to have a smaller footprint and that we would not see large standing armies, but we'd see the kind of technology in the form of drones or perhaps special operations personnel, which would give us a more surgical approach to dealing with the kind of insurgencies that we're seeing throughout the Mideast.
In the Providence Journal on Wednesday, Bob Kerr wrote an article about this whole situation, and he brought up the draft. Men, women, do you feel that the draft is somewhere down the line will be implemented?
I've stated this for some time now. I don't necessarily concur that there should be a sole military draft, but I do suggest there should be a national conscription for every single individual, male and female, no deferments, no exemptions, that should serve the United States in some way for at least 2 years. The military could be an option. I think we'd also see, if this came into play, you would see a certain amount of drug addiction going away. You'd certainly see gangs going away, and you'd see the kind of unfortunate things we see with our post-high school crowd getting into trouble, because now they have a definitive requirement to be part of American society and fulfill their obligation to support the country. So I think it would do away with a lot of problems that we're seeing today. So I do subscribe that we should see a national conscription bill for all, male, female, right after high school. Military could be one option.
And quickly, General, if they don't want us in Afghanistan, should we just get out?
I don't think we're able to do that. If they don't want us, we need to find a way to do it responsibly. By pulling out too quickly or without a definite follow-on plan to return that country back to the military forces of Afghanistan, we create a void. That void would be filled undoubtedly by the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, and other insurgencies that we would have to deal with, obviously.
All right, we have about a minute left. We do want to talk about Syria. Russia's foreign minister is now irritated with its longtime ally, which is Syria, saying that President Assad has been slow to implement a lot of the long-term needed reforms to end the conflict. And he says that the state there could spiral out of control if Assad does not follow some of those steps. Isn't it out of control already?
I'm not sure where Russia's been all these years and months, but it's really amazing to hear this come from Russia when the very essence of the United Nations has suggested so many times that we need to do something in Syria, and yet we've not seen the kind of support from Russia and China. And then when you apply the same philosophy to Iran, we've seen that many of the initiatives that were offered by the United Nations, they vetoed those. So it's coming out of the same person's mouth, different approach. I don't understand it.
And Russia has blocked UN Security Council measures aimed at putting pressures on President Assad. General Centracchio, thank you for your thoughts.
Good to be here.
And thanks for watching.